Hello and welcome to Jep's Outdoor Adventures. I'm your host, Jep. Today we're going to be doing a video, a long discussion. I'm going to warn you about that. This is probably going to be close to an hour long. But we're going to be doing a full discussion on gardening and what types of seeds and plants you should bring in a long-term wilderness bug-out bag. So if you want to find out more, don't go away. Okay guys, we're out here in the lodge today and we're going to be talking about seeds and plants that you should take on or in a long-term wilderness bug-out bag. Now, first thing I want to say is that there's going to be different opinions and viewpoints on this, but I'm taking it from the viewpoint that most people seem to take when they're talking about a long-term wilderness bug-out bag. A long-term wilderness bug-out bag, as the name implies, means that you're planning to go out into the woods for up to or over a year. In some cases, guys are thinking they're going to be out there for 2-3 years. So that's why we're talking about gardening, because this isn't like a normal bug out bag where you're going to be out there, planning on a 72-hour bug out. 3 days, bringing seeds would be, no real purpose, just taking up space unless you bring like a little bag of microgreens or something. It's really not useful because you're not going to be out there for more than 72 hours unless something happens and you're not able to get back home. Most people are going to be able to get back home within 72 hours or go to a friend's house or something. But in this case, most guys are thinking up to or over a year. And in that case, I could see bringing seeds being useful. I was watching a video. It's my favorite video that he's ever made, and it was the one that actually got me really interested in his channel. Really Big Monkey 1, Dave. Big shout out to him. He has the YouTube channel Really Big Monkey 1. And he made the video, Long-Term Wilderness Bugout Bag, my opinions. And it's an excellent video. It was over an hour long, but it was so worthwhile. I've watched that video probably close to 10 times, just over the period of a couple of years, because it's a good video. And he really went in depth on it. And he's a good teacher. I love watching his videos. But one of the things he did not have in there was seeds. So I saw a few guys making comments like, oh wow, that's great, but you should add some seeds in your kit. You never know how long you're going to be out there. And I saw that on a couple other videos on a similar topic as well. And then I found out that there are people who've made videos or kits for people who want to put plants in their bug out bag. Now, I live on a homestead out in Idaho. All my life we've lived on a homestead. We've lived here for about 6 years. And the first 10 years of my life, we lived not too terribly far away on more mountainous terrain. Here we live in more of a surrounded by wheat fields type thing, But all in all, I know what grows well in cold conditions, like a lot of people are going to be facing if they go out into the woods. I know how things grow, how much time it takes. Trial and error is the best way to learn. So hopefully I'll be able to share my not just thoughts and opinions, but also some information that we found out along the way. So the first thing I want to say is that I'm not necessarily saying you should bring this in your kit. I think it is a good idea. My opinion is that it's a good idea, but it might not be right for everyone. But the great thing about certain vegetables is that it can help make that meat last longer and go farther. If all you're getting are mice or squirrels or rabbit like you see on Alone, or maybe a grouse or two, pheasant, adding some potatoes or adding something to help that food go farther, saving that meat for the next day, carefully, and making sure that you keep it cold and whatnot, and then having the rest of that the next day with some potatoes or something else to help it go farther is a good thing, because otherwise you're going to burn through all the animals in your area. You're going to catch all the game. You're going to drive away a lot of the game in the area if you're constantly there making your presence known and hunting everything out. It's not going to do so well for you after some time. So supplementing that food with vegetables is a good idea. Now, I made a list of some of the considerations one has to think about on this matter. But some of the considerations are short grow time, long grow time, So short grow time would be like lettuce. It can take only about 35 days to mature. Long grow time would be like asparagus. I saw a video where they were talking about how to grow asparagus because I haven't grown any yet. We haven't, but you can start them from seed, but it takes about a year longer than if you just use these dried out roots. You dig them down into the soil, you plant them, and slowly cover them over with soil. Don't just pile up soil over it. You want it to start growing and then cover it over, and it's a long process. But you'll start getting shoots, but you want to wait 2 years until you start harvesting, and even then it's a light harvest. And then after that mark, the 3-year mark, when they start coming in is when you can actually harvest the plants. And you want to get them before they grow into a bush, because once they grow into a bush, they create these little red fruits that kind of look like cherry tomatoes, and they are poisonous. So if that isn't interesting, I don't know what is. But that's a long grow time, 3 years to finally be able to start harvesting. Good thing is that same row of plants that you planted, that asparagus, you just cut the tops off, and so it'll grow year after year. And there's been people who have grown and harvested asparagus from the same plant for over 45 years. So if you do it right and you take care of it, it'll last you a long time. But nobody's going to be out in the woods for that long on a long-term wilderness bug out, But that's something to consider. So you have the short grow time, you have the long grow time, and of course anything in between. Renewable plants like potatoes, where you can cut the tops off or cut parts of it off, or just take the whole potato, plant it in the ground, cover it over with soil, and a new potato will start growing from that. Same with onions. You cut the top off, you plant it in the ground, you grow a new onion. Same with lettuce. You cut the bottoms off, you plant it in the ground, you'll get a new head of lettuce. Things like that are not just neat, but they're good, because if you grow some onions, you take those onions out, you cut the tops off, you plant that, and then you take the rest of the onion and you eat it. You cook it up with your meat, potatoes, you name it, and then you can keep that going. It's really neat. Doesn't matter if it's onion or potato, it's nice to know that you can do that. Now, perennials, they come back year after year. They're the ones you're going to really love. You take like asparagus, like I mentioned earlier, you plant a row of asparagus, or you just plant one small plant, like lemon balm, and you let it grow, you harvest some stuff from it, and year after year, it may look like it dies, but it just keeps coming back. Same with our strawberries, like raspberries, and so you don't have to keep planting a new plant every year, which is excellent. That's what you really want more than anything. You'll want plants, or need to consider plants that are resistant to blights, diseases, and insects in your area. Now, there are certain precautions you can take to help your plants be more resistant to blights or insects or disease, but just in general, getting plants that are resistant to blights or things is really important. So, that's something you need to consider. There's different steps you can take to plant the pepper plant or the tomato plant to make sure that there's no soil on the leaves. You want to keep the leaves a good inch or two above the ground. You want to keep them dry. You only want to water the roots. Stuff like that to help them be more resistant to blights and fungal infections and things. But there's just certain plants, it doesn't matter what you do, they'll succumb to it, because in your area it's very prevalent. So doing some research and buying plants that are resistant to that, or whatever is in your area that you need to face, is important. Plants that are cold or heat hardy. Now, that's depending upon your environment. If you're in the UK and Britain, you're going to have different weather than you have in Florida. But whatever the case is, if it needs to be heat hardy, cold hardy, like for us, do your research and figure out what you need. For me, everything we're going to be talking about, the plants that I would consider, are ones that are cold hardy. And that's important to consider. There's also different plants that will stay alive during the winter, which is really neat. But if you have really bad winters, like in Idaho or Michigan, say, you're going to need to really give that some heavy thought. Plants that like wet weather, again, like the UK or Florida, where you're going to get a lot of water, or you're going to get a lot of humidity, or whatever, that's an interesting one. That's something you need to consider. Plants that are drought resistant, like aloe vera. My mom has like 10 aloe vera plants in the house, but they can go without water for weeks, months at a time. Like camels, they're good for a while. You need to water them every so often, but they are supposed to live in a desert, basically. So If you live in a more desert type environment, having plants that you can leave, without watering for a few days is important. Plants that need extra care, there's some plants that, just need you to be there 24/7, give them a lot of TLC to get them to grow. There are plants that are self-sufficient, you just plant them and you leave them alone, and they'll do the rest. There are plants that grow in different times of the years. Plants have more than one harvest. There's going to be some plants that you need to sow at certain times of the year to get different crops. And so having a good mixture of plants that will keep you fed throughout the year instead of just the spring or instead of just the summer is important. Plants that have more than one harvest, so there's going to be more than just one plant that does that, but there are certain plants that you can plant, and you'll get different parts of the plant in this part of the year, and then in this part of the year you'll get the fruit or whatever. But that's an interesting one that you need to consider as well. Medicinal herbs, that's very important. If you get cuts, scrapes, infections, viral anything, there's going to be certain medicinal plants that you need to keep in mind, either ones that live in your area or ones that you need to bring with you. Having some of that and knowing how to use them and when to use them is great, because like tea tree, you got to be very careful because they may be fine for you, but if I remember correctly, it's tea tree oil, as great as it is, even aerosolized, can be deadly to dogs. And, you need to do your research, but make sure that whatever it is, whether you're getting the essential oils or you're getting the plant itself, that you're very careful to make sure that if you have a dog with you and it's something that can kill a dog, that it's out of their reach, out of their grasp, not something that they can get to. Plants that animals like dogs can eat along with meat, or that you can plant in an area to encourage animals like deer to be in the area. So lettuce is a nice one. It's not expensive. You can get a ton of lettuce seeds. You can plant them out in the field, wherever there's deer or rabbits or whatever that you want. There's going to be a lot of game there, but lettuce is great. There's going to be a whole bunch of plants that you can plant out there, but you want to encourage game to be in your area. You sow it well, but things like lettuce, you can bring extra seeds because you're probably going to use that quite a bit. If you're going to be out there a while, then you can harvest the bottoms of the lettuce, plant it again and all that. But if you really want to encourage game in your area, lettuce is great. And with dogs, something interesting is as great as peas are, you don't want to give that to your dogs. They may be great for us, but it's what's been killing a lot of dogs because it's in their dog food, and it's not something that they were meant to eat. However, sweet potatoes are just fine for them to eat. Same with carrots, same with lettuce, and I believe they can have potato in certain amounts. I'm not 100% if that's something that they can actually have on a regular basis, because I really don't know. So again, you have to research that one, but beets are another good one. But you have to make sure they do not get into your garlic and do not get into your onion, do not get into your peas, because all those things can kill them. So again, you have to be careful because some people have big dogs. I know I do, not just one. So if I were to run out into the woods with my Long-Term Wilderness Bugout Bag, I need to be able to not just feed myself, not just catch a squirrel and have some stew at dinner time, but also be able to feed them as well. So, that's something to consider. Another one, plants that are very nutrient rich. You're going to need nutrients. It's not like you can go to the store, buy a big bottle of minerals and chug it down and you'll be good for a year. You're going to have to scrounge up as many nutrients and minerals as you can find out there. So plants that are very nutrient rich are important, like microgreens. They're easy to grow, very simple, small. They're not very filling because there's not a lot to them, but they are very nutrient rich. Root vegetables like beets. I believe potatoes fall into that category. Correct me if I'm wrong, but root vegetables are great. I love my beets. Beets are the best thing out there. They're delicious. You can eat both the tops of the beets. You can eat the beet itself, etc. Leafy plants like lettuce. Bush plants like beans, bush beans. They'll grow along and like a bush. You can harvest a ton of beans. Same with peas to a degree. That's awesome. I love my bush plants. They don't need a lot of help, but if you can give them a little something to kind of cling on to, that's nice. Climbing plants, like a lot of peas, a lot of pole beans, they need something to grow on. So you can plant that along the side of your shelter if you want. If you build something like what Survival Lily made, her wilderness bug out camp, you You can let it climb along the side of that if you want, like a lattice. Flowers like sunflowers, they're great because sunflowers will soak up all the toxins in your soil. So if you're in an area where, at least where we used to live, would sometimes dump oils or things that they weren't supposed to be dumping out there onto the ground and just act like it was no big deal. Well, that can really affect the soil. So if you're in an area that's like that, sunflowers are nice. Same with corn, because they will absorb all of the toxins in that soil, and you could throw them away. They do create the nice seeds, but they're also pretty to look at. Give you something to cheer you up, just like a good campfire. But that is a good thing about sunflowers. Again, you can take those seeds, you can roast them and eat them. You can use them to plant more sunflowers, fruits. So that would include peppers. You know, if you have raspberries or blackberries or blueberries out there that are wild edibles that you can eat, that's awesome. But there's no real fruits that you're going to be able to take with you and plant out there unless you're talking like apples. But that's going to take a good 20 years to make a good, healthy tree that will produce year after year, you know. So that's not realistic. But if you find apple trees out there, that's awesome. Actually, where we live, there are certain little nooks and valleys in the hills where you can bet the farmers would eat an apple and then toss it out of their tractor and it would land. And there's certain apple trees out here that are species that haven't been around for a good 100 years, and they thought that they were extinct, but they're rediscovering a whole lot of apples and pears and things like that that are growing wild out here. Actually, in the area not far from here where I hunted for the very first time about 5 years ago. Anyway, we found a whole bunch of apple trees, and I was munching on apples the entire time we were hunting. It's good deer food. You can harvest some of that and use that to help encourage deer and wildlife to be in your area that you can hunt. But I mean, it's good stuff. It's not going to last you the entire year unless you put them in a storm shelter, which is not really something you can do out there. But, you know, while you can get them, apples are awesome. They're very good. They're sweet. It's going to give you a little something to eat that isn't savory, so that's nice. But again, that's not something you're going to be able to just bring along with you. You're not going to have a little apple tree that you're going to go out and plant with you. It has to all be compact, so keep that in mind. Another one is plants that grow well together. There's a book that I'm going to mention later on in the video, but it's called Carrots Love Tomatoes, and it talks about different plants that grow well together, like beans and sunflowers. The beans will grow up and around the sunflower, and they do well together. They're like a symbiotic relationship. So you can plant certain plants together, and they will do a lot better than they would if it was just that one plant all on its own. So that's an interesting one. Wild edibles that can be cultivated. You may be able to harvest some wild edibles, maybe the seeds from them, and plant them in your own garden and be able to cultivate them, like stinging nettles. Another one is Jerusalem artichokes, things like that. And you need to make sure that any plant you bring does not affect or hurt any plants that are natural to the area. A lot of people forget there are a lot of wild edibles out there that you can harvest and eat, but you want to make sure. I was watching a video by Roots and Refuge Farm on YouTube, and they were talking about they had to cut down their pear tree, I believe it was a pear tree, because everyone was kind of giving them a hard time because apparently that type of pear affects the natural pear trees, the ones that grow there natively, in the area, because it reproduces with those trees, the pollen and whatnot, creates hybrids instead of the pure heirloom, trees, the ones that are actually native to the area. And so they had to cut their pear trees down. So making sure that you don't bring anything that will affect the wild edibles in your area is an important thing to remember. Now, I had a couple ideas. Now, this is all theoretical, and I doubt you will ever be able to do this while out in the woods, but why not? I might as well. One of which is, if you saw, again, like I mentioned earlier, that video that Survival Lily made about that shelter, it was very similar to something that a Native American culture used to make around their huts. It was a large fence, but it curled around itself, so that way the entrance would be hard to find, hard to get into for animals and people, and they could shut it off easily and fend off intruders. You build something like that, just a large wall, basically, a big fence, with a small opening on there so that something big can't get in there. And you have high enough ceilings that you can actually walk around in there. For me, they have to be pretty tall because I am currently 6'2". I'm still growing, believe it or not. So for me, it would have to be pretty high up. But if you can walk around in there, that's great. And having plastic drop cloth over the top of the shelter will allow the sunlight to get in. It will allow it to heat it up, and you're making basically a El Cheapo greenhouse. So as far out as that idea sounds, if you really are going to be out there for more than a year, having a greenhouse like that may not be a bad idea. Plastic drop cloths are not very heavy, they're not very expensive, and they're multi-purpose, so you can use them for other things as well. If you add in a bit of a gap between the first and second layer of plastic drop cloth, then it'll stay a lot warmer. There's some science behind that. It's really interesting, but you can build something like that, have a simple little door on there to help keep the heat in, but you can have a plastic drop cloth over the top of it, and you will have a makeshift greenhouse. Now, is that something that you could actually do? I do not know. I think it would be more realistic to just have it inside your fenced hut like area, like what Survival Lily did. Just something simple like that. One little corner of it has your garden, because you're not going to be building anything big. You're going to be keeping it fairly small because it's only for one person, realistically. Unless you have a family or something, in that case, you're building a full-on homestead. But if you're going to keep it simple, you're going to keep it small, just having it inside your shelter area isn't a bad idea. But if you're going to be out there for 3-4 years, you might as well build a greenhouse like that. It gives you something to do anyways. Another idea is to dig a spot into the earth with your shovel, if possible, and make it like a 5x5 hole, a 5 foot wide, 5 foot long, and a good 4 feet deep hole. Make it out of the way, somewhere you're not going to walk over, somewhere that you're not going to fall into. But take that hole in the earth and put all of your compost in there. Whether that be eggshells you find around, like from a robin's nest, just empty eggshells, you can put them in there. You can take the stalks from your sunflower and put them in there. You can put anything. You can put literally anything that is a plant or vegetable matter into that compost. And every, 3-4 months, you want to stir it around, you want to mix it up, you want to keep it well watered, you want to let it really rot. And then you can take that compost and you can put it over your plants. Again, if you're going to be out there for 3 or 4 years, you might as well. That's going to really help your plants out a lot. See, if you can't do that, then fertilizers and things like this here are nice for your plants. This is by Dr. Earth. But, there's the bag and then the liquid, fertilizer. And then this is going to be good for most plants. But right here on the front, you'll see there's a number pattern, 333, 4, 5, 10. That's telling you the composition and the concentration of what's in there. Now, I will hopefully be able to find a chart, some information about that. One of them is going to be like nitrogen, and it's going to tell you what's in this fertilizer. And for different plants, and depending on the soil composition in your area, you're going to have a higher number of potassium level of whatever. So, that's something to keep in mind. And so adding that to your soil for your plants is important because I do not know in certain areas if the soil is depleted, if it's really well nourished because people haven't messed with the soil. It all depends on where you live and where you're going. But I want to get to the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of this. What plants would I recommend that you either A, look into, or for me, what I would actually bring or consider bringing? For me, beets would be on the top of the list. They're excellent. I love them. They're good for the dogs. They're excellent for your health. They are a really nutrient-dense food. I love them. Bush beans are great. Pole beans are great. Asparagus is an interesting one because you can just regrow them year after year, but it may take a few years to get them off the ground. So that one I probably wouldn't bring just because of the length of time it takes. But something to keep in mind if that's what you are planning on doing. Butter, lettuce, romaine lettuce, all good. Just remember they will bring wasps and insects to your area. Every year we plant them, there's a ton of wasps and hornets in the lettuce because they love how it smells. There's a lot of water in there, so they can go in there, get their water, eat some food, but it makes them sleepy. So you're going to have a lot of hornets and wasps in there, so it's good, fish food that you can grab and put on your hook, but I don't want to grab a hornet. So that's something to keep in mind. I would not grow that too close to my hut. Potatoes. Now the problem with potatoes is that you have to have either a bag of starter potatoes or potatoes you've already grown and bring them with. Either anyway, it's still a lot of mass you're taking with. So you'll probably have to have your own separate bag that you'll just grab and run with. But you can't have them in a bug out bag because if it's cold, dark, damp, no sunlight, they'll start to grow and they could mold, all sorts of things. So that's one to keep in mind. Now with the potatoes, I'm very particular about the type I want to bring. Yukon Gold or russet potatoes. The red potatoes that we've grown, half of the crop, half the harvest, are all moldy. The other half are good, they taste great, they're easy to cook, but the other half is completely moldy. And so that's not something I want to deal with. You could just add it to the mulch. I don't know. That just seems like a waste. So for me, russet potatoes have done extremely well in the soils where we live, because again, Idaho, that one's kind of a no-brainer, but Yukon Gold is good too. So those are the ones to keep in mind. Garlic, just normal garlic is fine. You break off the cloves and you plant them in the ground. They're absolutely excellent antiviral. Helps boost the immune system, adds a lot of flavor to your food. Onion, I love onion. You cut the tops off, you plant them in the ground. Onion tastes great. It does help the food go farther. It's really healthy for you. Honestly, why not? But again, with onions, you got to have the starters, or you got to have an actual onion or two that you can bring. Funny enough, for a good couple months, if not a year of time, we had an onion that we had back in our shelf in the pantry that was in a plastic bag, because we got it from the store and we just put it in there and we put it in the pantry and kind of forgot about it, and there wasn't a lot of sunlight in there. And it actually started to grow. It was a healthy onion. There was nothing wrong with it. No mold, no nothing. And it was really growing a good, healthy stalk to it. It smelled amazing, but it had its own water source in there. So the water had like a greenhouse effect because it was almost completely closed off, and it would self-water with the water that was already in the bag in the air. And that was really neat. And we planted that onion, and it grew into a big onion. I mean, that thing got about that big, a good 5-6 inches around, and it was a big onion. And I fried it up, ate it, and it was delicious. It was probably the best onion I've ever had in my life. So you can do that with them, but I don't recommend putting them in a bug out bag because you never really know, unless you're keeping an eye on it or open it up every month or two. It could really soil everything else that's in the bag. So keep that in mind. But having them in your pantry, ready to grab, put in a bag, and go ain't a bad idea. Peppers. Peppers are great because add some spice to your food if you want the spicy ones, but they have the seeds inside. Take them off, plant them, got a new pepper. But remember, with all these different plants, the beets and all that, you want to let that plant grow and grow and grow until it is really ripe. You don't want to get them while they're young, because with beets, you usually harvest them while they're young, get good, healthy, fresh beets. But you want to let them grow and grow and grow until they are mature, and they'll start a center sprout with all the seeds on top. Now, I've not seen that myself, but that's what Roots and Refuge Farm said, and I completely trust their information. Same goes for cucumbers, same goes for squashes and other melons, so you want to keep that in mind. A lot of people, we harvest the plants and fruits while they're still young. So if you want to grow separate new plants, you need to wait for them to mature, or wait for 2 or 3 out of your 10 plants to mature. You harvest the others and eat them, and then you let those grow, and then you take the seeds and you plant them. But if I remember correctly, by that point, the plant isn't worth eating anymore. So you're kind of sacrificing a little bit, but the ends, it justifies the means, so to speak, in this sense, I guess. But with peppers, the inside is good. You take them out, and you can plant the seeds. And again, it does add some spice. And interestingly enough, I think it's Kenya, but wherever, in Africa, to keep the elephants out of their fields, they have cayenne on or some sort of spicy pepper on the fence posts. And the elephants can't stand it because they have that big nose, and they cannot stand that smell. It burns, and they leave everything alone. So I'm going to assume that might work for moose. If it'll work for something 5 times its size, then again, they're extremely stubborn, so I do not know. But for me, that would be a good idea, because moose are the biggest problem I'm going to encounter, because they can jump over fences that are 6 feet tall like they're nothing. So, yeah. Sweet potato, again, like I mentioned earlier. Peas, just like beans, just like peppers, there's the beans, the seeds on the inside. Take them out, dry them, or you can just take them and plant them in the ground, whatever, and you'll get a new plant. So in this case, peas are great, and they taste amazing. I love eating beans and peas raw. They taste awesome. Again, sunflowers. I love sunflowers. I grew a really big one year. It got about 8 feet tall, 9 feet tall, and it was absolutely gorgeous. I wish I could have grown another one again. Last year we tried, but they didn't grow enough, but the final frost killed them before they got to full size, which was unfortunate. As far as herbs would go, the peppermint grew absolutely wonderful up on that mountain. Tastes great, and it does help flavor up your tea. I do not know exactly how well that would taste with pine needle tea or spruce tip tea, but I'm going to assume it's a lot better than just having straight pine needle tea year after year. It tastes great, but after a long time it will get old. And you can make peppermint tea. Thyme is nice to help flavor food and whatnot. Lemon balm, like I mentioned earlier, grows into a bush, and it just keeps growing back year after year. Dill is nice because, again, it's seeds. You can take the seeds, add them to the food, you can plant them. And oregano. So help flavor that meat, because that's the other thing, is you'll get a deer or moose or elk or small game like squirrel or rabbit, grouse. You need to flavor that meat, because otherwise it's just going to be bland. So adding some seasonings like that are not just good for your health, but also help flavor that food. Microgreens, again, all great. But no matter what it is, unless you're talking about like the potatoes like I mentioned earlier, or maybe the onions you buy from the store, the majority of what you buy, in my opinion, should be heirloom. They have proven themselves year after year after year for how many years? They've stood the test of time. They work really well. They're a lot better than anything GMO. GMO'd stuff, it doesn't grow as well. It's much more finicky, and I can't afford that out there. I'm keeping it simple. What grows well for us is what I'd want to bring with, because I know that wherever I'd go, they'd work. So for me, that's what I'd want. So guys, before I go, I just wanted to mention there's a few, four main places you can find some good information. I'll have hopefully some links in the description box as well. But if you're wondering, Carrots Love Tomatoes is a great little book. I cannot remember who wrote it, but it is an excellent book. You can hopefully find it on Amazon or Thrift Books, but it's a nice, good book that talks about what plants grow well together, which is something you will need to do on a homestead, out in the woods, whatever. Another one is Roots and Refuge Farm. Husband and wife out there that do these videos, love their videos. Big shout out to them. Homestead Rescue is a show on Discovery, if I remember correctly, and I love their show. The Rainies are great, but every episode they talk about gardening, and they show different tips and ideas to help get a garden going. And so I love it, and it's just all the way around on the homestead. Excellent information. So please feel free to go check that out. I love their show. And then another YouTube channel called MI Gardener. Again, I'm hoping to have links to those YouTube channels in the description box below. Hope you guys like this video. Please hit that like button and that subscribe button, as well as feel free to share and subscribe. It really does help support the channel. I'll also have links in the description box below to my Patreon account, where you can help donate $1, $5 goes a really long way to help support the channel. Again, guys, hope you're having a wonderful day. Hope this was good information that really helped you guys out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.